In this Nikon D5200 versus Canon T5i or 700D video, I want to just break down the differences and similarities in the physical bodies of these two cameras, and I'll touch on some kind of internal points as well. But really I just want to give you an idea of how these two cameras look, where their buttons are, what those buttons do, and then let you kind of decide which seems best for you. So of course we have on the left hand side here the Nikon D5200. Right now I have the Nikkor 40mm macro lens on the front of that. I'm really happy with the performance of that lens. I don't have the kit lens on because I very rarely use the kit lens with the Nikon D5200. I am not happy with the 18-55 performance. It does not match up nicely with the sensor of the D5200. On the Canon side, however, the kit lenses, both the 18-55 STM and the 18-135 STM, are very nice. They are still kit lenses. They're not the most amazing or exciting lenses out there, but they are a very solid place to start, especially if you're looking for convenience. If you're looking for moving into the professional realm of photography, then there are other lenses you should consider because the kit lens is limiting, especially in lower light situations. So let's take a look at the back of these cameras real quick. On the top left of the Nikon D5200 we have the menu button, which will bring up the menu system. Pretty straightforward there. We also have the I button over here on the right, and you can see the slowness there for a second. This is one of the quirks of the D5200, that it's just a little slow sometimes. If I hit the menu button over on the Canon side, the menu instantly appears. The I button is kind of a quick access to these double row down here, and I have a more detailed video that goes into the menu interface of the Nikon D5200. But you hold that button down and you rotate this dial back here, and you can move through these and then select which ones that you want and then make a change to it using the dial. Sorry, you actually use the control pad, I misspoke, and the dial to change the values. This is your exposure lock button. It can also be used as your back button focus. I have video tutorials on that for both Nikon and Canon. I love using back button focus. It's really nice, and for most of you, you should check it out. Playback button. One of the things that I've noticed again with the Nikon is that sometimes that playback takes a long time to show. And there it is finally. Then we have our kind of control pad or directional pad with our set button or OK button in the middle, our magnify, zoom out, and help button, and we have a little delete button down here in the bottom right corner, getting kind of small. Over on the Canon side, a lot of similarities. I mean, really, these two cameras are basically very similar. There are some different buttons, and they're in slightly different places, and they feel a little different in your hand, but there are no huge differences between these physically differences between these two. We have our menu button, brings up the menu as I just showed. The info button cycles through a variety of different screens, including your standard kind of view screen, which of course this is a touch screen. That is one big difference between these two. On the Canon side, we have a very nice touch screen. That was something that I was not excited about when it was originally announced with the Canon T4i, but I really like it. It doesn't work for all situations, but for more still life shots and scenic, it is very nice to be able to choose your focus point by simply touching, and it focuses for you. But as I said, there are other information buttons there, or sorry, there are other screens that information button cycles through as far as on the camera. The magnification buttons are right here in the top right corner to zoom in and zoom out, and be careful when I use that term zoom in, zoom out. That is only for your preview of the image or when you're reviewing the image. That does not actually allow you to zoom in on the image and take a more zoomed in image. With a DSLR, all zooming is done by rotating the lens, or in the case of right now I have a prime lens on the Nikon, there's just no zooming. The only zooming you can do there is by moving forward with your feet. So this is zoom in, zoom out. This also is, you can set this for your back button focus or your exposure lock. And in the right corner here on top, you can use this to set your focus points. Inside we have 9 cross-type focus points on the Canon T5i. We have 39 focus points on the Nikon D5200. Not all of those are cross-type. Again, I think it's actually only 9 that are cross-type. So the cross-type are the higher accuracy. I get asked a lot about the differences there. Do we see huge differences in the number of focus points? Well, obviously there are a difference in the number of focus points, but in real world results, does it matter? And the answer is most of the time, no. I find the slight hesitation of the Nikon to cause me to miss more shots than the greater number of focus points allows me to get. And truthfully, 95% of the time that I'm shooting, I am choosing a single focus point to use so that I know what the camera is focusing on. So for me personally, it does not make a huge difference that the Nikon has many more. For beginners though, I do think that the Nikon having more, and it has a slightly smarter brain about selecting. And this way may be why it's just a tiny bit slower. It may just take a I shouldn't use the term a second, but it may just take a little bit longer for it to decide, but it does seem to be slightly more accurate, just a little slower. Down here we have our exposure lock and our AV control. So when you're in full manual mode, you can hold this down, rotate the dial on the front to control your aperture, while the dial by itself changes your shutter speed. And if you're in one of the other modes, holding that down will allow you to adjust your exposure above and below the middle line. Q button is your quick access to make this touchscreen work. I get asked a lot about the T5i. Does it accidentally activate the touchscreen? Am I activating things with my nose as I bring the camera up? That has never happened to me in a year of using the T4i and now the T5i, because you do have to press this Q button first, or the Q button in the screen in the bottom left corner. Either of those will do it for you. That's also the direct print button. Don't ask me about that. Never used it, but it is a feature there. Then we have our kind of our four-way pad here. It is not a completely directional pad like on the Nikon side. We only have 4 different directions, and those buttons also do things like lock us into our white balance or our AF. Let's just press set in the middle. The type of autofocus, and you can hit that and then you can touch the one you want on the screen. So it's a combination of physical buttons and touchscreen buttons. Our drive mode, which is a single shot, continuous on up like that, and our picture style. And down here at the very bottom, hidden away, we have our playback button and our delete button. So I have no images on this card right now. One other button that we have up here that I didn't mention is our live view or our recording start. The differences now between the D5200 and the T5i, you have the on switch, which is set up for taking photos, and you have the switch that moves it to video. And to start video, you press this button. On the D5200, there is no video switch, but you do turn live view on, and then pressing the little record button in the top right corner starts the recording. The dials on both now turn 360 degrees. Not huge differences there. We have our drive mode button here that activates that. We have our info screen, we have our exposure button, and then the on-off switch is centered around the shutter. Nothing else extra up there around the shutter, but hidden just in front of the dial. Let's go ahead and turn these sideways now. Hidden just in front of the dial is the ISO button, which allows you to go from auto ISO all the way on up to 12,800. That is in full stop increments, 200, 400, 800. The D5200 does allow the 1/3 stop increments, so you have finer control over ISO values. Now, interestingly, if you put the T5i on auto ISO, it does choose those third stops, but you cannot select them yourself. In general, I'm not a huge fan of auto ISO. It doesn't always make the best decisions. You might be getting the sense here that I often like to make the decisions for the camera most of the time because I am a little bit smarter, having a little bit more experience than the camera itself at taking pictures. But for beginners, it certainly is a nice feature. In general, and I've said this in my other videos, and I have more where I really talk about which one is better for different kinds of photographers, the D5200 does, on auto, right out of the box, seem to take slightly better photos. Now, if you're looking for photos and videos, the T5i with the STM lens does a really nice job of having that smooth autofocus that's available to you. Up on top here on both of them, they have the stereo microphones, and those controls are available to you. On the fronts of these cameras, on the front of these two cameras, one difference that I really like about the Nikon is it's got a small flashlight for low light focus assist. And when it's in low light and it's struggling to get focus, it turns that soft flashlight on. What the T5i does is it pops up the flash and does the strobe effect, which is not the best, because one of the things that happens often is people see that flash go off and they think that you've just taken the picture, and they start to walk away or look away or resume whatever they're doing. And in reality, the camera was just trying to get focus, and now it's ready to actually take the picture, and you have to corral the people back in. It also is bright. Even if the people understand that it's about to happen and they wait still for the picture, they've suddenly had this bright flash in their eye, and it causes not the most pleasant faces to happen. That's really it. We have little infrared ports on both to use with remotes. Over here on the side, one thing that I didn't point out on the bottom right corner of the T5i, or bottom left depending on whether you're looking at the front or back of the camera, is the depth of field preview button, which allows you to preview your depth of field based on your aperture. The Nikon does not have that depth of field preview button. We have the pop-up flash button, very similar. This is nice. On the Nikon we have a little function button that we can assign different functions to. By default it comes as your ISO, so you hold that down, you turn your wheel, and you can quickly adjust your ISO. If you are a serious HDR shooter though, and you're shooting a lot of bracketing, then you can switch this function button to control your bracketing. There are a variety of functions that you can apply to that, and the Canon doesn't really have anything. You can change the set button on the back of the Canon, so you do have some customizability there. And as I said, this little star, the exposure lock, can also be your autofocus lock as well on the back. Little speaker, I don't remember where the Canon speaker is, it's somewhere around there as well. Now the ports that we have are very similar on these two cameras. We have our external mic in, we have that also. They're all under one port on the D5200, and on the T5i they're split up under two ports. We've got our HDMI out. The T5i does shoot, or sorry, the D5200 does shoot uncompressed HDMI out. We have our little USB port, and we have our little display adapter, our little digital port that you could plug something like this into, and this is their little WU-1A, which is their little wireless adapter, which allows you to connect to live view on the camera. It's quite limited, but it is a neat function. This does not come with the camera. It's about $60 extra. I have videos that cover this as well. And it does allow you to, as I said, connect to live view and pull images off the card. I get asked a lot about whether there is something similar on the Canon side, and you can use an iFi card, which works quite nicely. It does not allow you to stream live view, but it does allow you to share images directly to a tablet, smartphone, or computer, or even any Wi-Fi device as well, or Wi-Fi hotspot. So under here we have the same things. We have our remote port, we have, and over here we use the little USB dongle as a remote port for it. We have our mic in, and we have our HDMI and our USB connectivity. I didn't show the SD card slot, but you know, we're getting kind of boring there. They both have SD card slots, one each. Battery. One thing that I have noticed is that the Canon does have slightly better battery life. The battery is a tiny bit bigger, and it does show in real world performances. Not a huge difference, but the Nikon does. And the Nikon does, when it starts to die, it really seems to die fairly quickly. So that was really just a physical tour of these two cameras. I interjected some of my own thoughts and opinions in there, but I have lots more videos that talk specifically about which camera I think is better for which type of photographer or videographer, because we are talking about both these days. And I encourage you to watch those. Links are right down below this video. If you have any questions or comments about this, just leave a message down below, or even better, come over and find me on the Facebook page, where I have a great community of folks, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.